You're listening to Building the Broncos with Nick Kendell and Carl Dumler, Broncos Country's leading draft and scouting analysts. Get on over to milehighhuddle.com to sound off on all things Broncos.
Well, welcome in Broncos Country, and it's once again time for another episode of Building the Broncos. I'm your host, as usual, Carl Dumler, and joining me, as always, Mr. Nick Kendell. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, doing pretty well. Just got back from a workout and having a little bit of FOMO right now with the combine going on. Went and covered it for 2 years for Mile High Huddle and was able to stay with my sister in Indianapolis. She's now moved, is in Kansas City, which thumbs down to that, and medical school there. So can't hang out with her anymore. So or at least stay there for free. And, just been busy, but hopefully we'll be back at the combine soon enough.
Man, that's a double whammy.
Yeah, I know.
She moves to Kansas City and leaves Indianapolis on you.
Kansas City's pretty cool, though. I mean, I won't lie. Like, I'm a big barbecue guy, though. So that's me and Andy.
Barbecue and beer. They got both there.
Speaking of which, I'm going to open up my adult beverage over here. Chad says it's okay as long as it's not showing off brand. There's no free pub.
There you go. All right, well, today we are going to obviously be digging into that combine. And I know we haven't had any of the drills yet. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to do our show until next week on some of those kind of numbers. But excited to talk. There is plenty that's been talked about. Elway and Fangio talking. And, of course, we've got some measurements on some players that we had some questions about. Mr. Tristan Wirfs might be one of those guys. We have some numbers finally. But anyway, make sure that you're following us on Twitter, because not only can you join us for this kind of show, but obviously at Twitter, we love to talk to you on there. So you can find me at Carl Dumler MHH and Nick at Nick Kendell MHH. And you can follow the podcast Twitter account at BTB Football Pod. And make sure you subscribe to our show. I know you guys are here live, some of you, and some of you are listening otherwise. Make sure you leave us a rating, as we really, really do appreciate that. And also go over to milehighhuddle.com. I know Nick just wrote a piece that everybody should go read and tell him how terrible it is. I'm just kidding. But it is kind of a controversial one on Garrett Bowles and looking at maybe that fifth-year option that Elway talked about today. But anyway, make sure to check that out. That's milehighhuddle.com. Part of the Maven Coalition and Sports Illustrated. And also know that this podcast is powered by Overtime Media.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
All right, Nick, well, what would you rather start with, measurements or the pressers?
I feel like we should start with the pressers first.
Okay, let's do it. So, Fangio today, I think he had a little bit more to say than Elway, I would say, just because Elway got asked a lot more national news rather than Bronco-related news. I will say both of them were pretty adamant that Drew Lock is the quarterback for the Broncos. There's no denying that. I know somebody asked Elway about Brady, and he said, well, we'd be happy to talk to him. And that was pretty much the end of that conversation. But they're happy with their guy. It does sound like everything is a go for building around Drew Lock, and they're going to have plenty of money to be able to do that. But Vic Fangio, let's dig into some of the things that he talked about. And let's start with the wide receiver position, because I think this is a pretty big topic for Broncos country right now. And, most people have Henry Ruggs. Even Henry Ruggs talked about it, that everybody keeps scheduling it or picking him for the Broncos. And so Vic Fangio talking about this group, this is what he had to say. He said, obviously there's a bunch of receivers, as everybody's alluded to. Everybody always says the draft is deep. I'm saying every year at this position, that position, you look, there might be 6 or 7 or 8 guys at a position, but it's also, they're so close together that if you don't take one of those, if that's what you want in the first round, there's a really good chance they're all gone by the second round. To me, that's not really deep then. Whereas it seems to me that the wide receiver is a deep group, because there's people that you kind of have a liking for that might be there in most of the rounds.
Yeah. So pretty much there's a little bit of confusion as regards to that when that first came out. Credit to Ryan Koenigsberg on that one, but he came out and kind of cleared it up later. But essentially my interpretation of that is that Fangio said some years, they'll say a class is deep, but then you see a bunch of guys go early and then there's a massive drop-off, which honestly I think he might be talking about. He might be hinting towards the offensive tackle class this season. Honestly, I think that's what he's that's what he's doing there. In comparison to the wide receivers, where there is a top trio, I would say, but you can find guys, like he said, you can find guys throughout the draft that, different people like. So I think that's what he's getting down to with the specifics, if you're asking me to read Fangio.
Right. I think it's showing the Broncos are not locked into taking a wide receiver in the first round.
And nor should they be. No position.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's how you get yourself caught in a bad situation. And that's the last thing the Broncos want to do right now. Let's say Judy, Ruggs, and Lamb all go in the top 14 picks. And I'm not saying taking a guy like Laviska or Rager or whoever they would take at that point is a big reach, but it's still there's a difference there. And so it's definitely not a position they want to get caught in. And you don't want to have where you have to take that position, even though you see a guy that's fallen that you really, really want. And so it's nice that way, where in the second round, there's going to be guys like Denzel Mims, Brandon Ayuk, probably not Jalen Reagor after he runs, especially after coming in at 206 pounds. If he goes and runs a 4.3, there's no way he's making it to the second round. But there's some guys there that you can really get behind and think, hey, this is a nice player that can start right away, that can be a very nice producer for the team. So I'm glad that they could have that kind of mentality going into this.
So, and all right, well, we got our first super chat here from Hunter Wertinen. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. Nick looks like he's drinking something fun. Yes, I am. They actually have a low-cal IPA, so I can still get my hops on while I'm not drinking as many calories. So it's a win-win. Any late-round off-ball linebackers you guys like for the Broncos? Carl, any ones that stick out to you? I really like that guy from Colorado whose name always escapes me. We talked about him here last week. He kind of played a little bit of that star position, but he's athletic. At least you're going to get some special teams value from him. I also really like Francis Bernard from Utah. He was really good for that team this past season. And, there's some other guys as well. Just going to shout out, I guess, Iowa's Christian Welch, probably an undrafted guy, but he flies around. He had a couple of injuries, but he's pretty solid athlete. So you can find linebackers at any point in the draft. It's kind of like interior offensive line. We're actually going to get a Pro Football Focus guy, Muski, on here with our interview next week. But his findings found that you don't have to spend a first-round pick at linebacker. The NFL is horrible at identifying good linebackers, and there's practically no difference between the outcomes or whether or not they hit or not between a linebacker drafted in the first, a linebacker drafted in the second, linebacker drafted in the third. So that's personally where I'd be leaning.
So the guy you were thinking from Colorado, Davian Taylor.
Yes.
And another name just up the road, Logan Wilson is another guy that I would keep an eye on.
Olsen also.
And so, this is kind of it's not a top heavy. You got Isaiah Simmons, who's not really a linebacker. He's just everything. And then you got Murray, who he's good. Don't get me wrong.
He's a good athlete.
And then you got Queen. But none of those guys are what some of the past drafts have been. Like last year with some of the guys that were there with the two. Why am I spacing on their name all of a sudden?
The Devons.
The Devons, yes. There you go. This is why I have Nick, because he's my name guy. And need that. It's not quite to the top heavy, but it is pretty depth wise. There's some guys you can find that you can fit into your system. And that kind of brings us to, I guess you could say, maybe one of the quotes from Fangio that you and I were talking about right before this, when they were talking about the linebacker position, because one of the things that they did mention is that they are going to pick up the option for Todd Davis. A lot of people were thinking the Broncos were going to turn that down, cut Todd Davis, try to get a guy like Joe Schobert or Littleton, something like that. It's looking like good chance Todd Davis is going to be a part of the Broncos this next year. And so Fangio, talking about that, he said, this was talking to Troy Rank. He said that they would be looking for an upgrade at linebacker, but it was a nuanced answer, because he said the team would play more 6 defensive backs to erase some coverage issues, and said that cornerback is a priority in the draft and in free agency. And so,
way of the future.
Yeah.
4-2-5, 4-1-6, 3-2-6. Just defensive backs taking off linebackers and defensive linemen. It's what's happening right now. We saw the Chargers do it a couple of seasons ago, and their linebackers totally fell apart, and they still made the playoffs and made a decent run. So you got to get guys who can be versatile on the back end. That's a big part of this defense specifically. But, the linebackers that can do everything, 5-tool guys specifically, they're just rare, and that's why they get paid so much when you can find them. But, that's kind of like trying to find a franchise quarterback. It's great to have them, but if you were, depending on one, you might be in trouble.
Yeah. And so, like I said, that's kind of make sure that you're kind of reading into that he does like his secondary players because he likes them to be very versatile. I know
physical.
I just saw recently a Denver Broncos mock where somebody had them taking McKinney from Alabama, and there was a lot of pushback against that. Well, that kind of comment that Fangio just made kind of raises the value of a player like that is very multiple, that you can put them wherever you want on the field, and teams have to really account for that of what are they going to be doing with 3 safeties on the field? Who's going back, who's coming forward, who's in man coverage, who's in zone, all those kind of things. So just kind of, again, something to kind of keep in mind as we look into free agency and the draft is they really are targeting that secondary and trying to add pieces to that group more so than probably linebacker.
Yeah. So before we keep going with Vic Fangio's comments, I'm going to try to get through the backlog of some of these comments here, Carl. We can do
before we get
comments.
All lost here.
Brian Kraft, very early on, he said, first-time listener, and he got a question for Chad and Zach. Sorry, not Chad and Zach. Maybe they're better than us, but we're the better looking too. Hopefully they'll listen to that. What do you think of the Broncos getting Jones and Slay? I think it's probably a one or the other. I think they'll probably – really it could be whatever one comes first. If they can get Slay for a third, I don't think I'd give up for a second for a cornerback who's approaching that 30-year-old dive bomb that is the cornerback market. Once they hit that, they kind of just fall off. I mean, look, for example, sometimes you get a guy like Richard Sherman, but he's an exception to the rule. Typically, you see guys like Champ Bailey, and when they fall off hard. So I would look for either, but I tend to lean towards Jones. A couple more here. Let's see. Here's a good one from on Facebook. John Polino. Could Denver sign Josh McCown to mentor Drew Lock? I would be all for that. I like Josh McCown, the person. I'm definitely biased towards him because I like him as a person so much. Also, there's nobody who could teach Drew Lock a better hair game. I mean, talk about the quaff that he can have even with the helmet on. I mean, Drew Lock's all about that. It's so important for playing the Q, as Drew would say.
We got to work on our time to get us synced.
So the thing is, the video is
backwards. I know.
I try to mess with my hair, and then I mess it up more. Yeah. But I would love Josh McCown. I wouldn't be surprised though if he retired. Here's something from Holden Adams on YouTube. Thoughts of CeeDee Lamb at 15, Lucas Niang at 46, Bryce Hall at 77, Jeremy Chin, not China, at 83, Nick Harris at 95, Nick Coe at 108. Tyler Johnson at 127, Antonio Gibson at 161, and Braden Mann at 214. Overall, looks like a really, really solid mock to me. I guess a couple picks that maybe I don't like as much. I think Nick Harris, I might try to get Keith Ishmael around later. I think they're comparable players. Also, there's a lot of talk coming out of the combine that Tyler Johnson is not doing well. I mean, just really struggling, not only just not because he's not testing, but the interviews, he's bombing as well. So maybe watch for that coming out of it.
Right. He said but the reason that he was pulling out of the Shrine game was to prepare for the combine. And now he's got to the combine and saying, I'm going to wait for my pro day so I can be better prepared. And it's just kind of like teams are starting to wonder, are you pushing this back because you know you're going to test terribly? We'd rather have this information now and talk to you about it than you keep trying to push this lie down the road and hope that nobody's going to notice kind of thing. And it's just not a good look. You're right. Talented player, but there's definitely a lot of questions that are starting to come up. And that's
there were questions early on in his career as well.
Right.
Work ethic stuff, paying attention in class. I mean, there were questions surrounding Tyler Johnson early on in his career at Minnesota, and they seem to have died down over the past year, but they've propped right back up. I mean, he was invited to the Shrine Bowl, came and then didn't participate. Now he's not going to do anything at the Senior Bowl. It's not a good look. And he took a spot from somebody at the Combine that would have participated. So I think teams are pretty irritated with him overall. A shout out here to Jacob Federer, better than the Democratic debates. Jake, the Hawkeyes are playing basketball right now. Go put on your second favorite team in the state of Iowa. Something here from Nathan Cata, who is rocking the most gorgeous picture of Russell Wilson. That's hair goals granted. Yeah, I mean, that's talk about the flow. go offensive tackle, get Drew some protection. I definitely would love to get an offensive tackle at 15. The question is, picking at 15, there are so many teams above Denver that are more desperate for tackle than Denver is, and this is a really good top of the tackle class. Are you taking the 5th best tackle, which granted is better than in most seasons, but are you taking the 5th best tackle at 15 instead of the 3rd best wide receiver or the 2nd best interior defensive lineman? I don't know. I think Mekhi Becton, Jedrick Wills, Tristan Wirth, if any of them are there at 15, I'm probably running to the podium. Andrew Thomas, I'm souring on more and more. I mean, talking with John Ledyard last week, watching his tape, there's just a stiffness in his game and an upside that I don't love him. And it seems like the NFL community does not like him in comparison to the media. He just keeps falling and falling. Like, there's some talk that 15 is the earliest he could go when he was talked about as a top 5 pick pretty recently. So, yeah. And then who's the other offensive tackle? Josh Jones. I like Josh Jones, but I feel like he's probably a guy who needs a red shirt. So he's not going to displace Bowles and Juwan James. So maybe, but it seems less likely picking at 15 than, say, if the Broncos are picking at 10, because you're behind the Panthers, the Giants, the Jaguars, the Chargers, the Cardinals, the Browns, and the Jets, all teams that could really look into offensive tackle. I don't think it's likely that one is there at 15 that's worth the draft slot. Right.
And even the Colts say their guy retires.
Costanzo's coming back. Ballard confirmed that today. They're working on a deal. So hopefully they'll go quarterback.
Right.
But that's a team that might take wide receiver. So it really changes.
And so this kind of fits with this one. Where will the draft for O-line, if they don't fill the O-line needs in free agency from Robert Castlow? It just kind of depends. Again, if one of those top guys falls, you take him in the first round.
Yeah.
Those guys are gone. You don't want to reach, like you said, for the next guy. And so then you are looking in the second round for like a Lucas Niang, one of those kind of guys that
take a Winogu.
Right. And then interior offensive line is a huge need for this team, especially if McGovern's gone. Depending what they do, like this question, if they don't fill in free agency, they got to find something. I know Wilkinson could move into that right guard spot, but with Leary and not having his option picked up, but it's still kind of that there's need for depth. There's need for, and with those mid-round picks, having 3 third-round picks, you got to expect in one of those first 5 picks, probably going to be an offensive lineman, somebody to either add depth or be competing for a start or something. I'm sure that Munchak's going to have quite a bit of say on trying to get one of his guys within those first 5 picks.
And worth mentioning, as far as the offensive line goes, today on the sidebar, we have the presser that everybody has available, but actually then the Elway or Vic Fangio go off to the side and have a conference with local media, which I snuck into my first year there. I was like, oh, yeah, I definitely belong here. But he talked about how the Broncos are actually pretty excited about some of the depth and youth that they have on the offensive line, specifically naming Schlotman, Morris, and Wilkinson. So I see people talk about, the Broncos have to take 4 offensive linemen in the next class, otherwise they're screwed. I think they like a lot of the guys that they already have on here. Now, are they going to be starters? No, but it raises the floor of the offensive line because throughout the year, you're probably going to see 7 or 8 different guys, and they like those guys more than general consensus. So I think they're worth bringing up, and seeing half or a fourth of those 12 picks go to the offensive line, probably not as likely as general consensus would be.
Right.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
I like this one. Like most, I think you guys are way understating Chenault's abilities. If he runs a 4.3 anything, he is a top 5 wide receiver. I think he's a top 5 wide receiver regardless.
He's my number 5.
I have him number 3.
Okay, well, you're definitely higher than I am.
And I've always said it all depends on some of these medical checks that are coming up and a little bit of the testing side of things, because he is, of the top guys, I would say he's the rawest.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, route running wise, he can't compete with Ruggs, Judy, especially Lamb and Judy especially. Yeah. But Ruggs even, I would say, is more advanced than him. Some of that is just the system that he was in there with Colorado, not having a great quarterback didn't help on a lot of different things. But you do have to worry about the injuries. I mean, he had another injury come up right here before the combine. Now he's still going to run his 40, but especially with it being it's a groin injury, right?
Pubic bone.
Yeah, whatever it is. That area is, especially when you're talking about football and making cuts, that area, it just seems like those injuries continue to show up over and over again. Same with hamstring and quad injury. Just there's certain things that always show up, especially positions of wide receiver, cornerback, things like that, where you're having to do a lot more twisting and turning. And so I like Shenault. There's a lot more risk involved in a player like him compared to a guy like Judy, Lamb, or Ruggs. And so that's just something you have to factor into the equation of, are you willing to use a top 15 pick on a guy that's going to have so much boom or bust?
And I want to say that this Shurmur scheme is much more dependent on receivers winning their one-on-one matchups, not being schemed open. And so the Scangarello scheme, you see it with Deebo Samuel. He wasn't the best route runner coming into the season, but they did things to scheme him open where I don't think in the Shurmur scheme they're going to be – it's just not built the same. So Shenault's concerns as a route runner are, I think, more amplified in this scheme. So going for guys who can win instantly at the line of scrimmage that are not being schemed open and H-back touches, et cetera, that's just not what Shurmur has done in the past. So I think it's not as good of a fit as when it was the Kyle Shanahan, Scangarello style offense.
Right. Joey Grubbs coming in with the question, what do y'all think? We're sticking with the wide receiver questions here because there's going to be a lot of them. And the Broncos talked a lot about wide receiver today. And most of their interviews have been with wide receivers.
Mm-hmm. And they've met with this guy as well.
Yes. What do you all think about the Arizona State wide receiver in the second? And this is Brandon Ayuk. I love him. He's raw.
Yeah.
He's got a lot to work on, but he's athletic. He's got some of the longest arms. What's his wingspan? I can't remember, but it
came out to 80 inches. So Nagy kind of overestimated the 6'9" wingspan, but still interesting.
Right. He's got speed. He's not as quick as some of the other guys, but he's got top end speed that you're looking for, which the Broncos need. He does have ability to get himself open. He's got pretty good hands. And so for a second round pick, it would not surprise me if that is somewhere the Broncos go. Not one bit. If they take another position in the first round, I would highly expect that Brandon Ayuk would be high on their board for the second round.
Yeah, I like Ayuk in the second round a fair amount. The reason second round and not first round, while he does have good acceleration, he can get up into his top speed pretty quickly. He really struggles with releasing off the line of scrimmage. He has a false step out of his stance at the snap that limits just how explosive he can be when the ball is snapped. And that on top of his ability just against press, it's kind of like N'Keal Harry with the Patriots last year. He did pretty good at Arizona State, but he had no release package at all. And if we've seen anything over the past few seasons, the guys who struggle with press coverage at the line of scrimmage, those ones are the ones that are going to have issues and have the highest bust probability in the NFL. So that scares me, but it's a second round pick and it's a good class and he has big upside. So I think it makes sense there. I just wanted to give a little bit of warning because his ability against press is concerning.
Right. And that's, I don't know. Did you hear?
We got to get to this $5 one here actually before it disappears.
Okay. From Wendelin Grotker. Thank you very much. Could you see the Broncos draft back-to-back wide receiver if some top wide receiver drops to the second round? Keep up the great work. Well, I really appreciate that last little comment there.
Thanks, Wendelin.
I've gone back and forth on this because they do need two wide receivers.
Yeah.
They need two cornerbacks, two wide receivers right now.
Two interior defensive linemen.
Right. They got. Unfortunately, their positions are kind of put together of what they need, and so I wouldn't mind it depending on who they get in the first, and if somebody there in the second is just too great a value to pass up. Let's say they do take like a CeeDee Lamb in the first, and somehow Jalen Reagor falls to the second. I mean, I'm talking pretty crazy situation here, but it would be hard to pass on that kind of talent.
Yeah.
Just because you got that kind of athleticism on the field for Drew Lock. Good luck. And so it wouldn't be unheard of. It's still not usually your best use of resources to double up early in the draft on a certain position. And you just talked about it with the offensive line of using so many picks on the offensive line that's not great use of your resources. It's same with trying to use your first and second round pick at the same position. Unless you are absolutely devoid of anything at a position, it's hard to go in that kind of direction.
Yeah.
I don't see them doing that. But at the same time, if there is a position that there's going to be talent fall in the first and in the second round, it's going to be wide receiver.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. And I was actually giving a shout out here to Eric Trickle. We were talking a little bit earlier, and I think I'm starting to dig in on him a little bit in regards to Henry Ruggs. Maybe he's coming around a little bit, but he was talking about how much he would absolutely love if they did take Ruggs round 1 to pair him with Denzel Mims, just because the physicality you get, the differing skill sets between Mims, Sutton, and Ruggs, and how those guys can, I mean, pardon my French, but kick ass on the outside as blockers. So that's something that would intrigue me a lot. And it just depends on how the board falls. You know, we got free agency that's coming up first, so we'll hopefully see a good amount of these needs knocked away so the Broncos can kind of take a more holistic approach to the draft. But at this point, I can't rule it out, but I want to second Carl. Maybe it's not the best allocation of resources. That being said, it's something that Patriots have done quite often in their drafts. They've liked to double down on picks. I mean, they took Gronkowski and Aaron Hernandez in the same draft class. Talent-wise, it worked out pretty well. I won't go any further on that, but right. That's just something that they've done, and it's just, you know, get a lot of guys like that can really improve your odds of somebody hitting.
Yeah. I thought, since we're talking some offensive line, Elijah Wilkinson, do we have high hopes? Has he hit his ceiling? From Mr. Rolo El Pablo.
I think you said that right.
Man, look at that. I'm on my game today. But my name game. I have medium hopes, I guess. I don't know. I mean, I think guard is his more natural position, and if there's going to be some place that he's going to be successful, that's where he needs to be. And I think he has the strength to be able to handle being on the inside. He just needs to clean up some of his technique issues. His hand fighting isn't always the greatest. He's sometimes late out of his stance. Some things like that, I just that make me a little nervous that he has kind of hit his ceiling. I don't think he's ever going to be a top 10 guard in football.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And I'm still trying to go back. I'm trying to get everybody involved in here. We have one here from Blake Williams way earlier. I'm going to lean up a little bit so that you can see my mouth. If Wirfs, Judy, and Lamb and Ruggs are gone off the board, do you think you'd either get Christian Fulton or Chenault? I would not mind Chenault. I think that's a little early for Christian Fulton. Chenault does scare me there. I think there's a higher bust probability, but I mean, huge ceiling. So at some point you got to weigh it in a little bit. You know, there's some point where the talent and the upside weighs too much that it overcomes the bust potential. And then let me see. What do you think about Brandon Manpuncher from Texas A&M? I personally prefer Joseph Charlton. I think he's got more upside potential, but I would like Man a lot as well. And I would have no issue taking a punter as early as the 5th round, preferably probably the 6th round. But you have 4 picks back there. Give Wadman, a chance to fight somebody. And shout out here, probably one of my favorite sleeper wide receivers in this class, John Hightower. That's another speed guy that would interest me a lot. We actually have some. Let me see. I had one here from. ET Scouting, friend of the pod, Logan Wilson for Wyoming, really solid off-ball linebacker, converted defensive back. I've seen people talk about him like he's going to be a top 100 linebacker. And the thing about linebacker that's odd is that athleticism doesn't always correlate with the best players. There's such a mental aspect to the game and a physicality and technical aspect that you see these guys who can fly around and run. And yes, that they can definitely succeed, but it's not always the end-all be-all, especially for a team that's going to utilize zone coverage like the Broncos are. So intelligence and some fluidity are just as important as that overall speed.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. There was a guy the Saints drafted quite a while ago at the linebacker position in the 1st round, and he was just an athletic freak. But
Stephon Anthony?
Yes.
Clemson.
Yes, and the guy just he looked like a missile on the field. But the problem was
or Jonathan Vilma. You're talking way old.
No, you had it right the first time. Okay. Yeah. When he first came to the league, I loved his tape because you see him just blowing people up. You just see him flying all over the field. But the problem is in college, he could get away with some of that, where he could be a step late, but his athleticism covered some of that up. You get to the NFL, and that just gets magnified all the more, where if you're a step late, you're late. you're done. It's over. The play's over. And he struggled to find himself on the field. So you're right. Athleticism is great to have, but it's not the end all be all. It's the best linebackers in the NFL right now are the guys that really have that great instinct to know where they need to be and are always in the right spot.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Yeah, I agree with you. So here's one here from Robert Caslow on YouTube. Where should the Broncos draft a running back? And I've honestly been okay taking a running back as early as round 3 in this class. We are going to have Pro Football Focus Mooski. I can't remember his first name right now. It goes by PFF Moo on Twitter. But he actually just came out with a analysis where he talked about drafting players and we're going to get the most value, like how much of a difference you get from a round 1 player to round 2 to round 3 to day 3. And running back, they had as many starters in the league and guys who were providing value that you could find day 3 and undrafted as they did in the first 100 picks. So honestly, I'm not taking a running back until round 4 at the earliest if I can help it. If there's a guy that I love, you can always change that. Like, let's say Cam Akers falls to the last pick of the 3rd round, the San Francisco one. Okay, twist my arm, why don't you? I'll take the athlete. But I would really, I think that the numbers game, you don't want to draft against the numbers. That's where you can really get yourself into trouble. Typically, front offices, you're not better at drafting than the average. So why go against the trends? You're just adding risk when it comes to that. So I think that probably day 3 is when you start to look around that area, and you can find guys then. I'm not concerned about that. Yep. You can find talent.
Right. And that kind of leads us here to Paul, because he's talking running back. I thought this would be a great place to put this. And Paul, thank you.
Paul,
man,
my guy.
Yep.
I love Paul.
We love you, Paul. I know, man. But he says, I want CEH. That's Clyde Edwards-Helaire. From LSU in round 2 is where I would take is where we'd have to take him. I agree. Probably 2nd round is where you're going to have to take him. But
I might do it still. I know it's against everything I just said, but at some point you got to love the individual player.
Right. And it's one of those, the nice thing about him is he offers more than just being a guy that runs between the tackles or just a speed guy. He's actually a good receiver. He's a good blocker. He's got the all-around game that you're looking for. Mm-hmm. And you and I have talked about it on our podcast quite a bit, that with today's NFL, really the most valuable running backs are the ones that can help in the passing game. Yeah. Because that's where the NFL's going. You're going to a 65% split of passing to 35% sometimes running. 60-40 is probably closer to where we are right now in the NFL, but it seems to be going up and up every year. And so having a running back that can help in the passing game, and if you look at what Shermer loves to do, he loves to get his running back involved. He likes running a lot of screen passes, so running back's going to have an opportunity in those. And CEH, he's great in the screen game. He's great in the open field at making people miss. He's great at picking up the extra few yards, just driving his feet. I've seen lately, like, people have kind of been going to some bigger running backs of like 5'11" or taller. I like my guys short because it makes it that much harder to tackle them.
They're also harder to find behind the line.
Right. You just can't get lower than them and you can't find them. And so I think he came in at 5'7". There's a guy I'm actually taller than. I can't believe it. But
let's talk about J.J. Taylor, Arizona, came in 5'5" and a 4th. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
He's shorter than my wife.
Yeah. So
God,
they're in the 2nd round. I agree. It wouldn't be a reach by any means. He's that talented to deserve to be in that spot. Just like you said, I do think you can also find other running backs that are very talented in the later rounds. And we've seen that in the NFL. I mean, look at the Broncos starting running back right now. He's undrafted, and he's had 2,000-yard rushing seasons. So talent can be found for sure. And it's just becoming less and less that you see a running back really have that first-round value for any team out there.
And I want to bring up just a thought to you here that was kind of maybe this is harebrained, but so this year is really a short running back class. So many of these guys are 5'6" to 5'9". I mean, it's really becoming a trend. Do you think that is because these guys who typically would be these running backs in the past are now becoming wide receivers because the economics of the position, not only in the NFL where you're getting paid more, you have a longer career at wide receiver, but in college and even in high school, you're seeing way less power football, and it's becoming much more spread air raid. So these guys who typically used to see, 6'1", 6'2", 210, 220, they're not playing running back anymore. They're being converted to wide receiver.
Yeah. I told you, I am ticked that I wasn't about 15 years younger so that I would be playing wide receiver right now, because that was my position in high school, was wide receiver. And we threw it like 3 times a game. If it was,
so you're a blocker. You're an
pretty much
blocker.
Yeah. I was a glorified offensive lineman, I guess you could really say. And I didn't mind, actually. They switched me to fullback when our fullback got a concussion, and I panicked because I'm like, I've never played this position, but I liked it because I actually got to do something other than block somebody. But you're right. In today's high school, college, everybody spreading everybody out, wanting the wide receiver position to be the focal point. And you are seeing a lot of these guys that probably would have played running back 15, 20 years ago, making that switch to wide receiver. So
here's one right here.
Yeah. Gibson, because
by Bawana Beast.
Yeah. Gibson, because you can switch him to wide receiver if he can't break through as a running back. Yeah, I mean, I think he's going to be actually a pretty valued player just because he has versatility to kind of do a little bit of everything. And you're right. If he fails at one position, switch him to the other and see how he does.
I'm really curious to see his gauntlet. He tried it as a running back in the Senior Bowl because that makes sense to do there, and he's going to do it as a wide receiver here because of the gauntlet and everything, all the testing to see how is able to run his routes, track the football, catches the ball naturally, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, maybe that's part of it. Also, because positionless football is becoming more and more of a thing. I mean, Noah Fant, is he a tight end? Is he a big wide receiver? He's both. Really, he's both. So it's becoming a bigger thing. And I'm just curious to see how the defense responds. Guys like Isaiah Simmons, et cetera. So it's really interesting. And good call there on Antonio Gibson. Really interesting player. We still have ET here, Elisha Thornton, bringing it back to the linebackers again. Akeem Davis-Gaither, you're talking about finding linebackers day 3 or day 2. Honestly, you should take a linebacker if you can help it day 2. That's when you're going to get the best bang for your buck. Akeem Davis-Gaither, I'd be 0% surprised if he ended up being the best linebacker in this class. A guy like him or Troy Dye could be really talented players. I mean, who was it? Darius Leonard, I believe, was the Defensive Player of the Year, won it over Derwin James and Bradley Chubb. Second-round linebacker in a good class, but he ended up being the best of the bunch. So you can find those guys. You don't have to use a premium pick on a linebacker just because you can find them day 2. So good call, Akeem Davis-Gaither, one of the better ones. Maybe a little small, but the game is changing. You got to get guys who can cover and guys who can chase. So interesting pick.
Well, I wanted to get to this here from Terry Randall. We really appreciate your donation here. And this is a different question than we've had for sure. Great show as always, guys. How do you rank the inside linebackers from the Hurricanes? Every time I flipped on the Shrine game, they were making plays or being talked about. #state of being. Well, go ahead.
Well, I think Quarterman's probably the one that I would be most interested in just because he has the most pop. I think that but it was Pinckney, the other one. I can't remember all the names there for the linebackers for the Hurricanes because they have
Michael Pinckney
fallen off. They had a lot of hype coming in and just haven't lived up to it. But I see the most splash with Quarterman. Sometimes he plays a little bit like a rabid dog. You're talking about it earlier, guys who are athletic and strong, but if they take a false step, the discipline and the structure of the defense is screwed. And that's something that happens with Quarterman more than you'd hope, but he brings pop, he brings energy, he's physical. At worst, you're going to get a guy who wants to run around there and kill somebody in special teams, which that provides value. But those linebackers on Miami, a lot of hype coming into the season, but didn't quite live up to it.
All right, Wayne Walker coming in with Sutton being a second-round pick and still on his rookie deal. Could he be a possible holdout for a new deal sooner than later if we go wide receiver at 15 to be the number 2 guy?
I like that profile pick. I don't know who that comedian is, but I definitely recognize him. I don't know who that is. Hit me up later, Wayne Walker. Find me on Facebook or Twitter. Let me know who that is because that's a funny comedian.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me after this next season for him to go, I want a new deal. Especially
after the next season.
Right. I don't see it this offseason by any means, even if they take that wide receiver at 15. He had a great season. Don't get me wrong, but he's done it one season. There's a lot of players that had one great season, and I think Sutton is a great player. He's going to be a great wide receiver. He deserves to be a true number one in the NFL. But
I don't think taking a wide receiver at 15 means that Sutton becomes a wide receiver too.
Right.
I mean, the Broncos had Chris Harris Jr. and they brought in Aqib Talib. Was one cornerback one and the other cornerback two? No, they're both ones. And with how much 11 personnel and even bordering on 10 personnel we're starting to see in the league, you need more than one wide receiver who can go out there and do things. I mean, we saw Reggie Wayne and Marvin Harrison get it done for years. I mean, we're seeing Will Fuller and DeAndre Hopkins, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, the Saints have been looking to get somebody to pair it with Michael Thomas for years now. So you need more than one guy. I think that you're just putting labels on there. And maybe it's a point of pride to be wide receiver one or the other. But, there's enough balls to go around. There's enough targets to go around where, calling Sutton, if you take a guy at 15, Sutton becomes a wide receiver too. I just think that's semantics. I don't think that's really painted in reality of the offensive structure and ball distribution.
And I think the Broncos, after this season, they don't have actually all that many contracts coming up in 2021, which is kind of a nice thing. And so they should have the cap room to go ahead and extend him and kind of set that up where, especially if you have a guy picked in the first round that you don't have to pay for another 4 years after the 2020 season, you're just set up well where you're only paying one guy high dollar, the other guy being on a rookie contract. So I don't think that'll be too big of an issue to go ahead and get something done with him, especially if he goes out and has another big year. You want to go ahead and make that guy happy and get him paid. I see the Broncos going ahead and doing that. But, yeah, I could see him holding out if the Broncos decide, hey, no, we're going to make you play out your rookie deal. They've done that with some players in the past. The Broncos have not always been one of the more aggressive teams at getting players locked up before they have to. And sometimes it's bit them in the butt. Other times it's worked out well. So it just kind of you take risk either way. And with Sutton, I think part of it also is just Sutton, his personality. I don't see him being a big guy that wants to make this big stink, and he's not a diva like you see with a lot of these other receivers. So I'm not too worried about him right now.
Yeah, that's a good call. And I want to give a shout out here to Christopher Do44, because he comments on here. He's very active on here. So I'd like to give the folks that are comment on here some talk. Bryce Hall is nice. Bryce Hall's an interesting cornerback in this class because a lot of people really liked him coming into the season, but he was injured. Some people thought he would have been cornerback one last year, but a lot of talk that he's going to run very slow and might be a very scheme-specific player, might not have man coverage upside, which, I mean, this defense, Vic Fangio's defense, is known for the zone, the half-field zone, et cetera, cover 4, cover 2 inverse, blah, blah, blah. But at some point, you're going to have to play some man coverage, and I just don't know if Bryce Hall has the wheels to stick there. So he might be a guy. I like him for the scheme, don't get me wrong, but I wouldn't be surprised if he falls to the round 3 just because he is very scheme dependent and might even have to make a transition to safety, which I believe he did play to start over at Virginia. So interesting player.
And I've seen him mocked in the first round to the Chiefs, and I've seen him clear to like the third round. Like you said, his value right now is all over the place. Yeah, and the combine is going to be huge for a guy like that.
Yeah,
there are positions.
The combine is overrated for some players, positions, blah, blah, blah. It's not overrated for a cornerback.
Right.
Cornerback youth, the speed tells, and it matters.
Yeah. It does, especially in today's game where you got guys spread out. You got to be able to cover one-on-one, and you got these wide receivers coming in who can run 4-3, 4-4. Pretty much everybody runs a 4-3, 4-4 these days.
And there are multiple of them on the field at the same time.
Right. And so you need guys that can keep up with them at least a little bit. And so we got Paul coming in again. Thank you, Paul. You are the man. Who do you see as the biggest riser and who drops come draft?
Well, I'll put this over there. I think we kind of already talked about it, but I think Rager is going to be a guy who's going to shoot up draft boards. I don't think he's going to be a reach considered at 15 by the time comes. If there's one thing I've learned about the draft the past few seasons, especially when it comes to the wide receivers, I've fallen into the trap before where I like these big body physical receivers, and these guys plummet. They fall. I mean, who was it last year? Kelvin Harmon and Akeem Butler. People thought those guys were going to be first-round picks, and then they fell to late day 3. I mean, round 4 for Butler, but still crazy. And then you see guys like Mecole Hardman, Andy Isabella, et cetera, rocket up the boards. Speed is at a premium. I mean, it just is what it is. And everybody wants it. So you have to pay that premium to get it. So I think Rager, after he runs really well, I mean, I know he's still not in Daniel Jeremiah's top 50, which blows my mind. I love Daniel Jeremiah, but that just doesn't compute to me. That's a guy who I think is going to skyrocket. And then one who's dropping, I mean, I've kind of already touched on it, but I think Andrew Thomas is a guy who's closer to offensive tackle 5 than he is to offensive tackle 1. And I think he is a bit limited, has issues against speed, top heavy, might not be the best fit at guard even, so can't kick inside, getting a blue blood bump, hard to say that 10 times fast, and playing in a scheme where, they really were able to minimize his deficiencies. So those are 2 guys that I think I would lean on as my go-tos right now, just hashtag for the brand.
Yeah. I think another one that will be interesting is, we talked about it last week, of some positions that the combine will help really sort out some of the rankings. And Tyler Biadasz is another that seems to be, he went from pretty much first round lock before this season to, I'm seeing him 3rd, 4th round now.
He was not good this year. He was coming off an injury, but he was not good this year.
Right. And so that's a guy that I could definitely see falling down some boards, and I can't see how he's going to be. I can't see him being worth the 1st or 2nd round pick right now, at least for where the Broncos are at. If they trade back and are in the last part of the 2nd round, maybe you start seeing some value there, but it's not where I would have it.
So here's one, Miller 707 champ. I've seen him on here before. That's a cute dog you have there. Anytime, still thumbs up for dogs, but cats also. Somebody asks, are you a dog or cat person? I like both. I just like animals. I'm sorry. If Isaiah Simmons falls past pick 5, do you think it would be wise to try to trade up and get him? I think they should. It's been a while since Denver has had a beast at linebacker. Honestly, I don't think Isaiah Simmons is a linebacker in the scheme to get it kicked off. He's kind of an overhang safety, would play where Will Parks was playing. And we talked about, I think before, you can play a 4-3 defense when you're in sub because he's a linebacker / safety / nickel. I mean, just, again, he's so versatile that you don't have to worry about it. However, when you're talking about trading up into the top 5 to get Isaiah Simmons, you're talking about kind of, that's the quarterback range where you're talking about giving up future 1st round picks. I don't think you can do that. So if he falls to like 9, 10, 11, 12, I'm calling crazy, but top 5, you have to give up way too much to get up there, especially in a year where there's quarterbacks.
Right. There's really only 2 positions that you trade that much to get up, and that's quarterback and pass rusher. Whether
Unless
that's
you have excess capital.
Right. It just, there's only so many positions that are worth that kind of value. And I love Isaiah Simmons, and he is multiple, but there's still a limit that you can really limit what he can do on the field. Just by pretty much just staying away from him, saying, "Oh, you're covering this guy. We're going somewhere else."
Yeah, I love him. He's my number 3 player.
Yeah.
So Wendell Grochter again, somewhere from Europe. I'm going to go with Wendelin. Let me see. Gosh, it could be England. That could be Germany. That last name says Germany to me. So could you see the Broncos draft back-to-back wide receivers? The top wide receivers fall. We talked about this earlier. Keep up the great work. Also, thank you very much. It depends on how the board falls. But I picked the wrong one. Excuse me. I was like, we already talked about this one.
Yeah, no. Holden Adams, thank you very much for your donation.
It's my Carl of the brains.
If Kinlaw is there at 15, do you take him? I know there are a lot of questions about his knee, but I love him as a dominant nose tackle. You guys are awesome. Boom. Yeah.
The beer's empty. I'm feeling good. No.
Oh, yeah. There you go. Getting that redness in the cheeks.
Yeah,
but
right. Gosh.
If Kinlaw's there at 15, he has to be considered. He's a top 15 player on my board for sure, and he's at a position of need for the Broncos. He fits exactly what they need of a guy with length, size, power,
versatility on the defensive front.
Now he's not a finished product by any means, but he could easily become a top 10 interior defensive lineman in the NFL.
Yeah.
And so I would be running to the podium if he's there at 15.
And it sounds like coming out of the combine, the knee passed, it's healed. And I think it was Ian Rappaport who said future top 10 pick, Kinlaw. So that says pretty much all you need to know. If he's there at 15, you probably take him because he's not going to be there at 15. So if he is, be happy.
It would not surprise me if there are quite a few teams that have Kinlaw over Brown. on their board.
He's got more upside.
Yep, he does, and he kind of fits a little bit more of you. You like that pass rusher.
Mm-hmm.
Brown has pass rush ability, but Kinlaw has like Chris Jones ability, and I think we've made it halfway clear that we like Chris Jones. I think.
And I do want to talk about this last bit. I love him as a dominant nose tackle. I don't see him as a nose tackle in this scheme. I think that typically you want your nose tackles as low to the ground as they are wide, and Kinlaw is 6'7". You don't want that guy taking on double teams and getting pushed back. You want him 5 technique, 3 technique, using that length and not having a leverage disadvantage. So nose tackle, probably not in this scheme, but he'd be playing that Shelby Harris role, and then especially when the Broncos go into sub package. Sub bothers me. That's going to be my new crop, my behind. But I would absolutely love him, but not as a nose tackle. I think you're probably okay with Purcell there. Yeah, pretty good against the run this past season. So I don't think that's his scheme fit.
Well, talking about scheme fit, Annan coming in here with who are the best scheme fits in this draft.
Let me see. Pick the best players that are scheme transcendent. Tristan Wirfs, scheme transcendent.
Yeah.
Isaiah Simmons, scheme transcendent. Jeffrey Okudah. If you can't fit Jeffrey Okudah in your scheme's bad. But let me see. Scheme fit in particularly.
Well, I'll start with my top guy, Jerry Jeudy.
Okay.
I think he is one of the best scheme fits for the Broncos. You said it earlier. You need wide receivers that can get themselves open. Well, no wide receiver is better at getting themselves open in a hurry than Jerry Jeudy. He is one of the most advanced route runners I've ever seen coming out of college. His ability just to win with changes in speed and what he's trying to do on the field. And I think he'd be a day one impact player. And with Shermer, like I said, that's exactly what you want as a player like that. Plus, on top of that, he has the speed to be able to beat you over the top if you really want him to go do that. He wasn't asked to do that a whole lot at Alabama because, hey, you got a guy named Henry Ruggs and Waddle who are also great athletes. Devonta Smith is, I think, an underrated athlete as well. And so they're kind of going, well, Jerry Jeudy, you do all the underneath stuff. We'll have all these other guys kind of doing the deep stuff. Jerry Jeudy can still go deep. There's a good chance he's going to run under a 4.4 at the combine. And so I think he's just such a great fit of what they're looking for, of an athlete that can really expand the field, but also can win in a hurry and be able to take those quick passes and turn them into extra yards for the team.
Okay, interesting. And here's one for you. Again, Buana Beast, really active on the chat. Thank you for being so active, Buana Beast. Your top 5 running backs, Carl. I'm just going to totally pin that to you. You want to do a snake draft here? Or you just want to kind of go back and forth? I'll go with my number 1 here, and then you can we'll do a consensus one. My number 1's DeAndre Swift. I think he's the most balanced running back in this class. He's not the most explosive. He's not the best pass catcher, but I think he does everything well. And surprisingly, for a team like Georgia, they really like to rotate those running backs. He's got a lot of tread left on his tires, so I really like DeAndre Swift. He'll be building the Broncos' number 1 running back.
Okay, then I'm debating between Clyde Edwards and J.K. Dobbins here.
Okay.
I'll go Clyde Edwards just because I think he's a little bit more well-rounded. And Dobbins, one of his biggest weaknesses is he is terrible as a pass protector. I mean, I've watched him get thrown into the quarterback a few times. I love his game, but if you ask him to sit there in pass protection, he's going to struggle. Where Clyde Edwards, a little bit stronger in that area, so he'd probably be my number 2 back.
Well, this one might seem blasphemous, but let's say J.K. Dobbins is 3. He's your number 3.
Yeah, that's
number 4. I'll do 4 and 5 then. Just wrap it on up. On number 4, I'm actually going to take Cam Akers. You want to talk about a guy making chicken salad out of chicken bleep. That's what he did at Florida State. For a team that brings in so much talent, especially in the offensive line, as they do recruiting-wise, that offensive line at Florida State is just absolutely freaking terrible every year. And Cam Akers, I think he's probably one of the guys who can do a little bit of everything that you want. And then my number 5 would be Jonathan Taylor. I think that if you're running between the tackles, power scheme, up the middle, whatever, that's fine. But they take him off the field every chance they get on 3rd down. They do not trust him at all in pass protection. And I did think the receiving ability improved this year, but it's still something that concerns me. They're taking him off the field. So all that on top of his fumbling issues, which he puts the ball on the ground more than any back in this class, and how much he was used at Wisconsin, he scares me. He scares me a lot, especially in today's game.
Right. No, I'm with you. And I love your thoughts on Cam Akers. I've never seen a running back get hit in the backfield more times than him. I mean, it's almost every single play. The guy is just fighting to get back to the line of scrimmage. Just because, like I said, I mean, the defender's almost taking the handoff. So what he does on the field and how he makes guys miss, he's going to be an explosive weapon for whoever takes him. I wouldn't mind if that's the Broncos. And so, yeah, I would have him there, and I agree with Jonathan Taylor there at 5. The fumbles, big concern. Like I said, the usage, big concern. There's some questions. I mean, he's a talented player, but there's going to be a lot more questions about him compared to some of the other guys coming out.
Comedian Brian Potion. Thank you very much, Wayne, for getting back to me on that. I knew I recognized him. He's very funny. So, all right, Carl, we probably should get guys get in here. We got a few more minutes left. We're gonna keep going until we get a few more super chats, if that's okay with you, Carl.
Yeah,
we're getting them in here.
Yeah.
So
I wanted to get Robert Caslow here. If Brown is there at 15 and we don't take him, Elway has officially lost his mind. Yes, he has.
Yeah,
absolutely. Because another guy that is a perfect fit when we're talking about scheme fit to me is Brown. Derek Brown at that size, that length, that power, that tenacity that he brings to the table. I think he's got to be one of Fangio's top 3 players that he loves in this draft. I mean, I can see Fangio just sitting there going, that's our guy. He won't be there, like you said. But if he is, I don't know what I would say if the Broncos said, nah, we're good. Unless free agency went crazy on the defensive line, got Chris Jones, got a couple other guys and said, we don't have any room for this guy. Otherwise, there's no reason to pass on a talent like that at 15.
I guess here's a scenario for you. What makes Brown fall to 15?
Well, it would take probably 5 quarterbacks. Then you're going to have Isaiah Simmons in there, Jeff Okudah. You're going to have the 3 wide receivers go, and you're going to have probably 4 offensive linemen. And Kinlaw go before him. I didn't count it up in my head how many that is, but that's about the only way that it just teams have other needs other than defensive line. And like I said, he is the most well-rounded and most NFL ready of the defensive linemen, but because his ceiling as a pass rusher is limited in some ways, I mean, he's still a great pass rusher, but he's not going to be a 15-sack kind of guy like an Aaron Donald kind of guy coming on the interior. Yeah. And so for some guys, they push those guys that can handle the double and triple teams down just because you can find other guys that can do similar things. I think Ledyard talked about that on our last episode of just there's a reason that you have these 2 guys and then everybody else. And because they offer a little bit more than what anybody else can offer. But, I can see him sliding. It's a real possibility, especially if he runs really slow here at the Combine.
Or as Brian said, takes a bong hit gas mask the day before the draft. So,
come on, Brown. Take one for the team.
Yeah, getting that Rocky Mountain High going there. But, I think it'll be interesting if he falls. Something that I want to kind of come back to here, bring back around. But it was talked about that I think it was Elway who said that this is probably the best free agency class is the interior defensive line. There's a lot of talent, and that was the case last year as well. So while interior defensive line and pass rushers are at an all-time high, the amount of talent that is on the interior defensive line is also high, and that means you're getting guys in free agency every single year that you can get. So maybe that'll push a guy like Derek Brown down just because the economics of it. There's not a scarcity of talented interior defensive line. Maybe that pushes him down. I can't see him getting past the Colts. Apparently the Colts love him. Mm-hmm. But I mean, I could see it. I mean, I think it's more realistic than people think. I think teams don't draft players for what they are. Teams draft players for what they're going to be or what they think they can be. And a guy like Brown might have a limited upside, as crazy as that sounds, and that could push him down. So safe as it gets in this class, but maybe like where is he going? So it's worth talking about. I think that'd still be silly. He should be a top 10 pick. And we got another Euro check here, all the way from, hey, Wendell, let us know where you're from, buddy. But €5 coming in here. If the Broncos were to draft a running back early, would you see the Broncos extending Lindsey? It would depend on how early for me. Like if they take Clyde Edwards-Helaire, 2nd round, I don't know. that would kill me to say no, because I do love Phillip Lindsay. I think he brings more than just his on-field contributions. But from a pure business standpoint, following the model, I don't know if that makes sense. I mean, he's an older player as it is coming in. Germany, there we go. Good to hear. That's my country of origin as well, from Ostfriesland up there. But anyway, back to the running backs here. It would depend on how early they took one, but Phillip Lindsay is older. He came into the league older. He had a lot of carries at Colorado. And everything says no, but my heart says yes. So I'm glad I don't have to make that decision.
Right. It would depend on the contract, I think, with them and how long he wanted to have an extension. I know that they have actually talked to him and his people about getting some kind of long-term deal done and trying to get him locked up at a deal that's fair for him, of understanding he is an undrafted guy and hasn't had the biggest contract, but also understanding that running back is just not a position that you pay. I mean, we're going to talk a lot about that on our next episode, of just the value that you get from each position and where you take them in the draft. But Lindsay, because he does offer so much more than just being a running back, because he is a hometown kid, because he is that try hard, does everything possible to go out there and show that he is worth something. And there's something to say about then the rest of the team seeing that. Undrafted guys going, wow, look, they keep paying these guys, the undrafted guys, Chris Harris Jr. getting paid. Todd Davis getting paid, all these guys that keep getting paid that were later round or undrafted guys that they don't really care what round you were taken or if you were even taken. They just care about talent on the field. So then that makes undrafted guys that are maybe some of the more talented ones go, that's the team I want to go to. So it can be a great value for the Broncos to go ahead and invest for so many different reasons in Lindsay, and also understand that they have then a two-headed monster there at running back. Say they do take Clyde Edwards there in the second, or J.K. Dobbins or whoever. It gives them a nice 1-2 punch where teams are kind of going, man, we can't let down our guard. It's like Royce Freeman comes in the game. You're going, man, I'm not worried about that. That there's nothing that scares me about that kind of game. And so, I
wanted to get to this point also before we're still hopefully get a few more super chats in there. Carl and I'll keep talking. Carl, I'll let him in on a little secret. Carl hasn't eaten for a bit, so he's. We're doing this hunger strike together here. But something here from Dre Addison. Speed on offense at every position makes it a nightmare for teams. Denver can be a high octane offense, and I mean it is the flavor of the month right now. If Kansas City would have lost, everybody would have been trying to build these multi-versatile. Or the talking point would be everybody's trying to build these multi-versatile running games. But the Chiefs won. It's all about the high-octane speed offense. So I agree with Dre here. I think the speed is, again, we talked about it, it's such a premium right now. And it's not just speed vertically. You got people like, oh, well, what about Darius Hayward-Bay? What about Ted Ginn? Blah, blah, blah. Guys who could run 9 routes well, la-di-da. Good for them. I'm talking about guys who are multidimensional speed guys who dictate coverage. And we'll just use Ruggs as an example here just because he's the easy one. I don't think he's going to be there for the Broncos at 15 in the end, which makes me sad. But again, it's, February 25th, 8:03 in God's time, Central Time in Iowa here. But the Henry Ruggs, he makes it so that you can dictate coverage on the back end. You have a team that wants to play a single high safety. Well, where's that safety going to shade? Because you have Sutton on one side and Henry Ruggs on the other. They have to make that decision, or they can't play that, and then you're taking a guy out of the box. Then you can run. That frees up not only the run game, but it frees up Noah Fant. Or let's say that you have a cornerback who is not the fastest, but is a little bit long. So on that side they're going to have to play press because otherwise he's toast. So just that amount of speed can change things so much for a defense. It makes it easier for the quarterback, and it creates space for everyone else. And I know the cliche for football is, it's a game won in the trenches. And I agree that that's true to an extent, but it is changing a little bit where it's becoming more of a speed and space game. So again, the Chiefs won. They're analytics darlings. They're the heavy pass load team that's looking to get the ball and out to guys like Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, Mecole Hardman, blah, blah, blah. But that's the way the game is going right now with the changes in the league. And you can blame the NFL all you want. It's really a bottom-up effect where you're seeing it more in college, and there's a trickle-up effect from that. But again, speed is something this offense is lacking outside of Noah Fant. It really needs it, and that's why a guy like Ruggs and even Jalen Reagor make a world of sense at 15. Even though it's a deep wide receiver class, it's an element this offense is really missing. And if you could get that, it would have a synergistic effect on the whole offense. So again, speed is so important for an offense and creating explosive plays.
Something that I was reading the other day, they were doing some of the math, I guess, of for every 0.2 when it comes to like saying a guy's a 4.3, well, that might mean he's a 4.39 or it might mean he's a 4.30. Well, for every 0.2 or 0.02 difference, there's about 12 inches of separation difference, say 20, 30 yards down the field. And so understand, like, there's going to be other guys that are fast, but we're talking about Jalen Reagor and Henry Ruggs who could be breaking the combine record kind of fast. And so there is a difference between fast and elite fast. I mean, Tyreek Hill, there's a reason that everybody wants the next Tyreek Hill, at least on the field. And I've seen Annan post this a couple times, so I want to go ahead and get this. Who are the best defensive scheme fits? I'm going to go with
Javon Kinlaw is one.
Yeah, I'm going to go with your boy McKinney because he likes those guys who are multiple in the secondary, who can play all over the place and teams can't know what he's going to do. And McKinney obviously brings that to a team. And the Broncos showed last year that they loved having 3 safeties on the field. So I think he would be a great fit for the Broncos there at 15.
I'm going to go with the knockoff version of McKinney, Terrell Burgess. Guy who can play that 2 deep safety, can come down and play nickel, has some run fit questions, but is physical. And I thought he looked really good at the combine. Another guy that I like a lot is Jeff Gladney. Very physical, can play a multitude of coverages. I think he could be a great player. Yeah. And then an interesting one who's not going to test at the combine, but again, Fangio loves not letting you know where the pressure is coming from. Guys who are versatile. I think Josh Uche from Michigan on the edge. Denver doesn't really need an edge rusher, but he can kind of play the Hassan Reddick role, where it's a little bit of edge, a little bit of off-ball linebacker, et cetera, et cetera. And that Hassan Reddick, maybe that's going to scare some people. That's the negative one in my head. But I think he'd be a really interesting player in this defense just because, I mean, in the Senior Bowl, he was carrying tight ends and running backs 40 yards down the field from a guy who's been primarily an edge rusher in his skill set. That's really just a versatile, interesting piece.
All right. I saw one. Where is it all of a sudden? Sorry, I scrolled clear down to the bottom, and now I'm trying to scroll up. I thought this was kind of interesting. Moana Beast, just because I think this is always a big discussion of how valuable are draft picks. And for the Broncos this year, we're talking about Stephon Diggs and Slay as another that the Broncos could be trading draft capital for, and then also having to worry about having a big contract for them. If you are the Texans, do you regret trading those picks for Tunsil?
I don't. You're picking the bottom of the first round every year. I mean, both those picks together wouldn't equal a top 10 pick if you packaged them together. And they needed to do what they could to help Deshaun Watson. He's been getting absolutely pulverized. They added one of the top 3 best young offensive tackles in football in Tunsil. I know he had the holds this year, but part of that is because of Deshaun Watson trying to hold on to the football and create things when he should be getting the ball out because otherwise he's going to get himself hit or hurt his offensive lineman. But again, I feel like the Texans, they have their quarterback right now. They have and he's on a rookie contract. Your window is the next 2 seasons, this past season, this next one. And then once you pay Deshaun Watson, I mean, you're probably another 3 years away before that contract starts to become more feasible again, better to swallow. So
right.
Again, I think it is short-sighted and there's been some bad issues that have led up to them having to make that move. But I don't think you regret it because the window, and again, this is a team that just saw what happened to Andrew Luck after seeing Deshaun Watson get pulverized. There's a little bit of panic in there, but you added one of the best 3 young offensive tackles in football with Tunsil, Ronnie Stanley, and probably Ryan Ramczyk being the other one. So probably you don't love that you have to do it, but the opportunity to get a young tackle like that, I can't be too upset with them. Right. I think I have more issues than trading a third for Duke Johnson. Honestly.
And honestly, let's say in 2020, the Broncos prove that they have a very good roster. Drew Lock proves to be a top 15 quarterback in football. I honestly might be thinking about what can the Broncos do with that first round pick? What kind of player could they go and trade for? And I mean, you saw what the Chiefs, Frank Clark.
I prefer the Kansas City Trees.
The Trees. Who are the chefs? Great job, but who are the chefs? That's one of my favorite commercials. No, they traded for Frank Clark, and he was a high impact player for him this year. Now you could argue how big of an impact, because he didn't quite make as big of an impact as some people thought he would this year, but he was still a huge player for him on that defense that, honestly, I think the defense won them the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
You can give all the credit you want to Patrick Mahomes and some of the plays he made, but he also cost his team quite a bit in that game. He made a lot of bad mistakes and more that he probably should have been punished for than he really was. But getting beyond that, again, they made some very aggressive decisions and getting players and just pretty much saying, this is our time. And when you have that window, you take it. I'm sorry, in the NFL, it is very limited windows. I know you look at the Patriots and you say, oh, look how big their window was. That was such a unique situation.
Rare.
That's just not going to happen very often in the NFL. Maybe we should be encouraging Drew Lock to be marrying a billionaire wife so he doesn't feel like he has to take these great contracts. Come on, Drew Lock, help us out here. No, it's still – you have to understand that was a very, very unique situation. And they had Bill Belichick on top of that. So when it was just a perfect storm for them to be able to have the kind of seasons and the last 20 years that they've had. Beyond that, it just doesn't happen very often. I mean, even look at Peyton Manning. It took a lot for him to get 2 Super Bowls.
Yeah.
And I still think he's a better quarterback than Tom Brady.
Only guy to take 4 different head coaches to the Super Bowl.
Right. Aaron Rodgers.
That's a crazy stat. We'll never see that again.
Right. Aaron Rodgers, maybe one of the most gifted quarterbacks that the NFL has ever seen. And still, it's been hard for them to build a great team around him. And so if the Broncos have that kind of opportunity to go add a great talent to the team that can really help put them over the top. And again, there's still got to be a lot of things that happen here in 2020. And you know how much, obviously we're talking about the draft. We love the draft. We would talk draft 24/7, 365 if you let us.
We are close to that 24.
And so understand, we love the draft, but I still think there are times where draft picks are overvalued.
We talk about the 3rd round pick. What has been the hit rate on those recently? Justin Simmons, obviously a solid hit, but you have Carlos Henderson. You got Brendan Langley. You got Royce Freeman. You got Isaac Yiadom, Draymond Jones. I'm probably forgetting some, but you tend to overvalue those picks and those players that you can get from those picks. Really what it comes down to is top 50 picks. Top 100 really, but top 50 picks are what it comes down to in getting hits. So you don't want to overvalue them too much. Nope. If you have a chance to get for sure, like talking about trading a 3rd round pick for Darius Slay, sure. What the odds of you hitting somebody as good as Darius? Of course you can hit a Justin Simmons, but it's all probability. And are you playing the lottery? I don't know. It just scares me. Shout out also to Dre Addison. He's brought up these guys a couple of times. 2 good cornerbacks for the Broncos to consider day 3. Amik Robertson and Leverett Hill. 2 smaller guys, but good click and close and can come downhill quickly. That
right.
I would like a fair amount. So interesting. Also, one of these talking about it. Tons of holds and false starts. Comes to join a team late. Also comes from a quarterback who holds onto the ball longer than anybody else. But that's part of it. But I think the Dolphins win the trade. I honestly think it was a win-win. That's one of those rare win-win trades. Dolphins kicking the can down the road because they're not competing. Texans going for it now. That seems like a win-win. And shout out to Robert Kitchens and BNS enjoying your beer and single malts tonight. I will be hitting you guys up soon. I'll be hitting up the single malt soon, but probably should get out of here. It's been a long time, and I can hear the wife starting to get antsy out there. So you can find Carl on Twitter at Carl Dumler MHH and myself at Nick Kendell MHH. Make sure you head on over to milehighhuddle.com, an affiliate of the Maven Coalition and Sports Illustrated. Go to iTunes, leave us a 5-star rating and a comment. Please, guys, we really do appreciate it when you go take the time to do something like that. And I go back and read every single one of those. It really does mean a lot. You can follow the Building the Broncos podcast and all our other great audio content by subscribing to the Huddle Up podcast wherever you listen to your shows. You can follow us on Twitter at Mile High Huddle and at BTB Football Pod. For calling Nick, wrapping up another episode of the Building the Broncos podcast. We hope you guys enjoyed it. Anything you want to give a shout out to before we get out of here, Carl? Well, we still got 134 eyeballs on us right now, or I guess double that. So there might be some single eyeball people out there.
Just definitely want to continue to give you guys all shout outs for the chat and just making this so much fun. Like Nick said, I haven't eaten food here for a little bit, but you guys are feeding my soul here, and I appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun. I love this and love you guys. And I'm just so excited that we are to the combine. Lots of information coming out. So again, make sure you're following us on Twitter, because we're going to be tweeting about a lot of things going on. A lot of numbers that are going to be coming over, especially the next couple days. So you're not going to want to miss what's going on over this next week, especially before we hit the free agency time.
Yeah. And shout out to everybody who donated on Super Chat. Appreciate you guys. And, we'll see you next week. As always, we like to end on Go Broncos.
You've been listening to Building the Broncos. Join Broncos Country's deep divers at milehighhuddle.com to keep the conversation going.